Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Afterthought, where we talk all things mental health and real life. My name is Roxanne Francis, and I am the owner and operator of Francis Psychotherapy, mental health service here in the GTA of Ontario, Canada. Usually, I start my afterthought with some jazzy kind of music, but for some reason, my music is not working today, and I didn't want to delay coming on much longer because I do have a really interesting topic, or at least I think it's interesting that I want to talk about tonight. And tonight we are talking about self harming. And I must admit that tonight must come with a trigger warning because we're going to be talking about some sensitive topics. As a matter of fact, let me just put it here in the, I'm just going to pin it in the comments that we're talking about a sensitive topic um, because we're going to be talking about cutting and what that is, and self harm and what that's like, and why we need to talk about it. It's really really important. Let me just see if I can pin this. Pin. There we go. All right. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me. You know, I wanted to talk about it because I have a number of young people in my practice that I see. And I've been doing this work for a while, and this is not new to me that people are self-harming, but it seems, at least in my practice, to be having an uptick in the midst of this pandemic. And so I wanted to just speak about that and why it's a thing. So first of all, what is self-harm? This is, for those of you who have never heard of it before, self-harm is basically just that. It is harming the self, right? It can look like, hey Magdalene, hey Colleen. Self-harm can look like, pinching the skin. It can look like scraping yourself. It can look like scratching. It can look like, poking with a needle. And it can be as severe as using a blade to draw blood or scratch the skin, or any kind of blade at all to cut yourself. And it can happen on any part of the body. Most often I've seen it on the forearm. A lot of people will cut on the arm. Some people will cut on on areas that are less visible. So I've seen people cut the back of their legs. I've seen people cut their hip area, because that part of your body can be covered by clothing, right? Sometimes people cut sometimes people try to hide that they're cutting by wearing long sleeves and sweaters all year round, because they just don't want anyone to see. They don't want anyone to ask any questions, because how are you going to explain that, right? It's pretty hard. So, hey Tanisha, why do people self-harm, right? Why do people cut? There are a number of reasons that people do that. People will cut because they need to feel something, right? A lot of times people will cut when when they're under a lot of distress, and sometimes the trauma or the distress can have them so numb to their own feelings, they can no longer get in touch with themselves. And so oftentimes they will cut themselves just so that they can feel something, feel anything. Sometimes people will cut because their lives are so chaotic. Sometimes the stress that they're living under is so great. Their lives are so ridiculously chaotic that they need to cut themselves in order to feel like they have some control over something, especially if they're being harmed. If they're being harmed and they have no control over how they're being harmed, when they're being harmed, the duration, the length of time that they are being harmed, at least if they cut themselves, they know, I have control over this. I have control over how much blood I draw. I have control over how deep the cut is. I have control over the distance across my skin at which I draw the blade, right? So there's often the need for some kind of control. People cut when they're feeling overwhelmed, when they're feeling anxious, when they're trying to manage some of that stuff. Let's see, what else? Why reasons that people do reasons that people don't self-harm. So people don't self-harm um, because they want attention, right? That doesn't happen. I've heard parents say, oh, they're cutting themselves because they just want someone's attention. That's not true. And people also don't self-harm because they, they want to go to the hospital. People don't self-harm for those reasons. Um, you know, I must admit that oftentimes people in the Black community will say things like, um, they don't, they don't have anything to worry about. They don't have anything to be depressed about. They don't have anything to be anxious about. And none of that is true. As a matter of fact, um, young people are depressed now at a much higher rate than before. Mental health is actually the next pandemic or the next epidemic that we need to be aware of. Mental illness, right? Or poor mental health, poor mental wellness. So many young people are being diagnosed with anxiety, depression, ADHD, bipolar disorder, um, borderline personality disorder, uh, OCD, so many different things, and it's challenging. And we live in a world where we're more disconnected than ever before. And I was talking to someone today mentioning that, part of the need of human beings outside of safety, food, and shelter, the next thing that we need on that hierarchy is a sense of belonging. And we are so disconnected. We spend so much time on our phones. We spend less time connected to each other, especially now during this pandemic where we've had to be away from each other. If there is no sense of belonging, then that can really impact your mental wellness. There are so many people who are overwhelmed by depression, who cannot get out of bed, who are overwhelmed by anxiety. They feel like they can't leave their homes. And so they feel like the only thing that they can do to manage what they're struggling with is to hurt themselves. So many parents will say, well, what does that solve? That's not making anything any better. Why would they choose to do that? Well, young people, like, they don't get up one day and go, oh, I'm having a bad day. I think I will self-harm. It doesn't work that way. Oftentimes, young people are drawn to that when they feel like they have no other choice, when they don't know what else to do. When you're an adult, when you are in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s, you have had some life experience. So if you're feeling, and not to say that adults don't have anxiety and depression, because we know that they do, but when you are a full grown adult with some life under your belt, you have internal resources to manage certain things. You can get up and you can call a therapist. You can get up and go do some exercises. You know that you can call such and such and have a long conversation. You can have a heart to heart. You have coping mechanisms that you can use to help you through these challenging times. Young people who are 13, 14, 15, they don't know anything about these coping mechanisms. They don't have life skills. They don't have the benefit of years of life under their belt. And so they do what they know to do. Now, one of the things that people tend to talk about is, why cutting? Well, for some, and I don't know how it started, to be honest with you, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how it started. The truth of the matter is that this is what happens in North America. And young people, they reach out to what they know. And unfortunately, a lot of young people are cutting. If you ask a teenager in your life if they know what cutting is, they will say yes. Do they know anyone that's cutting? They will likely say yes. It may not be within their close friend circle, but they probably know someone from school who is self-harming in some way. And because they are aware of it, they now know that that is something that they can do, right? And a blade is not hard to find. Kitchen scissors, crafting scissors, razor blades. Young ladies shave their legs. Kitchen knives. A blade is something that's easily accessible in the home. They can quickly go to the dollar store and purchase a razor blade and take it apart and cut themselves, right? This might seem like a frightening topic, like a very sensitive topic. Roxanne, you shouldn't be talking about this. But I feel like we need to talk about it because so few people are talking about it, and our young people are desperate for support. So, one of the things is that, yes, Wendy, it can be a way of getting attention in indirect ways. Yes, you're right. So, does cutting happen in every culture? Well, it happens in, hey, Allison, it happens in different cultures. Sometimes people think that cutting is something that only white people do. That's not true at all. Magdalene says it's a well-needed conversation. Thank you. So yeah, it's not something that only happens in white culture. Black children are doing it too. I have at least 4 Black young people on my caseload who are actively cutting, right? In North America, it might be cutting. In different countries, it might be different things, right? People do what they know. So in different areas, different countries, they might try other kinds of risky behaviors, other things that would sort of put their lives at risk, other things that would cause them to feel the adrenaline rush, other things that I would think are downright dangerous. A lot of young people are doing because it makes them feel alive and it makes them feel something. Hey, Jermaine, we're just talking about cutting tonight. Okay, so before I move on from that, the one thing that I will say is that if you are aware of a young person in your life who's cutting, please do not shame them for it. Please do not. And please don't say things like, we don't do that. We do that. We do that more than you know. Hey, Natalie, it's something that we need to be aware of and we need to talk about. And I'll explain that in a little bit. First of all, is it dangerous? Yes, it's dangerous. And let's talk about why it's dangerous. Anytime you are using any kind of cutting implement to cut into your skin, that's dangerous, right? Hey, Chantal, especially when young people don't know much about the anatomy, right? I mean, my first crack at post-secondary education was in biology and biochemistry, but while I might know about the anatomy, I still don't know as much as, friends and people who I know who are physicians. But if someone is cutting their arm, right? They're cutting their forearm. Sometimes I talk to my teenagers that I work with and they laugh because I say to them, listen, you might not have any intent to die, but sometimes if you're cutting, all it takes is a sneeze and you cut the wrong place and you could bleed out. Who knows that you're in your bathroom cutting? No one, right? So if you are not careful, I'm not saying that if you're cutting, you should know what you're doing, but if you don't know what you're doing as it relates to your body, you could cut the wrong place and you could be in serious trouble. If you are feeling extremely emotionally overwhelmed, or if you are wrought with emotion and you walk into your bedroom hoping to only lightly cut your skin, but you are so overwhelmed that you go a little bit deeper than you expected, that could have some serious implications. And oftentimes when young people are cutting, the intent is not to die. The intent is often to feel something. The intent is to have some kind of control, like I said at the beginning, over what is sometimes a chaotic environment. Sometimes it can be, in order to have some kind of release from the sense of overwhelm that you're feeling. And so the intent is not usually to die, but if you're not careful, that can be the outcome. And so it can be very, very dangerous. If the person, first of all, let me just say that the person who is self-harming is someone who is hurting, right? No one is cutting because they feel good. No one is cutting because they're happy. No one is cutting because they're proud of themselves or because they're excited. It does not work that way. So when you come in contact with someone who you know is cutting, I want you to be mindful that this is not about you. This is not the time to say, well, when I was your age, such and such never happened to me. Or, you're just trying to embarrass me. Or you're just trying to get my attention. Let's not make this about you. This has to be about them, and they have to be surrounded with love and empathy, and we cannot shame them. Wendy says, offering options to manage and deal with pain, frustration, etc. is important for parents and caregivers. Exactly, exactly. Hey Amanda, hey Christine. We're just talking about cutting tonight. So the other thing to consider is, again, don't center yourself in the story. Do not make it about you. It's okay to ask your loved one or your child or the young person in your life whether it is that they're cutting. If you notice, if you are seeing scars on their hands, on their arms, if your young person is removing a t-shirt in front of you and you notice scars on their body, you can ask about that, but please ask it in a sensitive way. Please don't say things like, what's that? Or what's happened to you? Or what are you doing to yourself? That is not going to get you anywhere. They're going to shut you out. They're going to shut you down. They're not going to want to talk about it. And that would have been a beautiful opportunity to have a healthy conversation. You might start by saying, is everything okay? Or I noticed something on your arm. Do you want to talk about that? Or, do you want to talk about this here? Be gentle, be mindful that they're hurting. They already feel shame about what's going on because most often than not, they're trying to hide these scars, right? They don't want anyone to know. They don't want to really talk about it. So if this is something that they want to talk, they don't want to talk about, you do not want to approach it from a place of judgment, right? Or a place of criticism. You want to approach it from a place of warmth, of empathy, of understanding, and of acceptance. Approach the conversation from a place of, no matter what you say to me, it can't go wrong. We just want to have an open conversation. Try not to, it might be shocking to you, but try not to act shocked, right? Because you want them to come to you and have a conversation. If you, it's kind of like talking about suicide. Hey Rosie, talking about suicide doesn't make someone want to die by suicide. It more often than not, it will make them feel relieved that, oh, finally, here is an opportunity for me to actually open up with someone about this. And it can be similar for cutting. Yes, Natalie, how can I help? How can I help you, right? Is there a way that I can help you? Is there something that you want to talk about? You want to, when you ask about cutting, it won't make them want to cut. Guys, I can't talk tonight. I'm tired. But I do want us to have this conversation. So ask about it. Ask if they're okay. How can I help? Is there something you want to talk about? How can I support you? Right? Rosie, I don't know if you want to chime in. You mentioned earlier that this was something that has touched your family. Again, be mindful how you ask about it. Try not to stare, right? People get embarrassed. Can you imagine if we've all been sequestered for like 15, 16 months under quarantine, and many of us have put on weight. Can you imagine if you put on 20, 30 pounds and you saw all your people again and they start staring at your belly? How would that feel? That would just feel awkward and uncomfortable, and you would just want to crawl under a rock. Same when you notice the scars. Do not stare, right? Give people some dignity. They might be young, but young people need dignity too, right? So you may want to just say, first of all, don't do it in public. Don't do it in front of everybody else. It needs to be a conversation with just you and the other person. Call them aside, maybe at nighttime before they go to bed, or when you have a moment from work. Don't have this conversation when you have to rush away. Don't have this conversation when it's time for you to go to a meeting. Don't have this conversation just before they rush off to school, right? Make sure you have time. Ask them how they're doing. Is there anything that you want to talk about? I noticed something on your arm today. Can we talk about it? I really just want to offer you some support, right? Not, you're trying to get attention. This is not how you do it. If you're not careful, you're going to wind up in the hospital. You don't have anything to worry about. That's not how we want to approach this at all. you know, offer relationship, offer support. Don't offer judgment. Don't offer criticism. This is something that is happening. It is happening with our young people. It's happening every single day. If you have a child who is cutting, if you have a young person in your life who is cutting, if they're open to talking about it with you, the first thing you need to do, outside of offering a welcoming, supportive conversation, you also want to offer some kind of safety plan. As I mentioned before, it can be quite dangerous. And also, the person who is cutting may also be thinking about suicide, right? So if you are if you suspect that they're cutting and you talk to them about it, you ask them about it and they say, yes, they're cutting, the next thing you want to ask about is, have you contemplated suicide? Is that something that you're thinking about? It might sound like, oh, I can't say suicide. It might sound weird and yucky coming out of your mouth, but you do need to talk about it because it allows them the space to process those emotions with you, to process those thoughts with you. Because if they're alone with those thoughts, chances are they might start to move through with that if they have a plan, they might start to move through that plan, right? Natalie says, very true. Wendy says, love this topic, very relevant in our time. Many children, including adults, are going through a lot. Yes, they are. And I just want to mention that children are not the only ones who are self-harming. Adults self-harm as well. I worked with someone a long time ago who worked in the medical field, and she had access to all kinds of things, and she would take her own blood. And that was her form of self-harm. Right? Rosie says, it's so important to not say, how could you do that to yourself? Yes, yes, yes. On the list of things to not say, how could you do that to yourself? Don't say that. And she says, it's so often delivered with disgust and only deepens the feelings of shame. Yes, yes, yes. So I want to talk about safety plan. Again, cutting can be very, very dangerous. It can be only a matter of time before they engage in behaviors that are even more dangerous. They can move on to suicide. So you want to start talking about, okay, what are some things that we can do so that when you feel this way, when you get this trigger, when you feel like you want to reach for a razor blade or a knife or a pair of scissors, or a pin or whatever it is that they use, what can we do so that you don't get to that, right? Also, you want to make a list of 1, 2, 3 people that they can call if they feel like they need some support, if they feel like they need someone to talk to. If they find themselves alone, you want to give them the line for Kids Help Phone. You want to get, and burning. Yes, Rosie, burning as well. Yes, young people are self-harming with burning. Jermaine says, thank you for speaking about this. Yes, it needs to be talked about. What else did I say? Kids Help Phone, the crisis line, either nationally or the region in which you live. It's really, really important. It's funny. In many families, they will put the 911 number or the number to a close family friend on the fridge, or the nearest fire department, or even the pharmacy. They put that number on the fridge. The other number that I want you to put on the fridge is a number for the crisis line. And talk to your kids. Let them know what the number is for. Let them know what crisis is, how to identify when they might be in a crisis. Not necessarily like a crisis where I need to call 911, but an emotional crisis when it's 3:00 in the morning and I'm the only one who's awake and I can't stop crying and I'm hyperventilating and I feel like the world is closing in on me. I can call the number I can call the number here. If you are feeling really, really overwhelmed and I'm not available and I don't know, Auntie Wendy is not available and Uncle Jermaine is not available, you can call this number instead of reaching for a blade, right? Have that discussion with them. Let them know that this is available. One of the things that I do with my my teens that I work with is I send them to the dollar store or I send them to Walmart. Thank God that we're no longer under restrictions. But I tell them to take $10 if they have if they have $10 with them, and find a bag of the sourest candy that they can find. The kind of candy that you put in your mouth and the whole world just turns blank because you can't think, right? I get them to buy a bag of those or 2 bags of those, and I get them to scatter them everywhere that they would normally frequent. So they need to have them all over their rooms. They need to have them in their backpacks, in their purses, in their wallets, in their favorite jacket, in their sweater, in their jeans, in the glove compartment in your dad's car. Wherever they're likely to sit, they need to have one within reach, because if they're in crisis and no one is around and they feel like they need to cut, I want them to reach for that and pop it in their mouth, right? The thing is that what we're looking for is the immediate distraction. The thing becomes, everything in their mouth becomes so sour that they can't even think, and they have to finish the whole candy, right? That's the plan. The plan is to distract yourself so much that by the time the candy is finished, you're like, oh, what was I overwhelmed about again? Right? And it kind of distracts them from that. The other thing I get them to do as well, if possible, is to run the water in the bathroom as cold as they can and splash it on their face, right? Or if you're at home and the freezer is nearby, to grab 2 ice cubes from the freezer and put it on the tips of your jawbone, right? Those are some DBT, distress tolerance techniques that are sometimes helpful in keeping kids from moving towards the self-harming. So I'm just looking at a couple of comments. Natalie says we can come up with a keyword. I love that. Yes, I love that. If you are in a space and you start to feel overwhelmed, you can, let your best friend, they can let their best friend know about the keyword. They can let the godparent know about the keyword. They can let Uncle so-and-so or mom know about the keyword and know that I need some support because I can't function right now, right? Rosie said some signs are never wearing short sleeve shirts or shorts or bathing suit. Yes, I was mentioning that at the very beginning, that one of the signs definitely is always being covered up, because they're trying to cover up the scars, right? Because it's embarrassing. They're feeling shame. They don't want anyone to know about it, right? And, it can be really, really challenging to come up with what it is that they need to say to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want anyone pointing it out. And so the other thing too is that if you notice, if you make a friend, let's say for example, and you guys are hanging out and you notice some faded scars on their arms, please do not stare. Please don't ask them about it. No one wants to rehash that area of their life. If they offer and they say, man, when I was young, it was really, really difficult. There was drug use in my family and I couldn't function and I was cutting as a teenager, then that's fine. But please do not stare. Please do not ask them, what's that? Please don't, what are these lines on your, don't. It's not appropriate. In the same way we don't, or we shouldn't comment on people's weight or physical appearance. Don't comment on the scars on their arms. There are already feelings associated with that. So that's kind of where I want to leave that tonight. I don't like to keep you guys on for too long, especially that tomorrow is a holiday in Canada. Tomorrow is what I like to call National Reflection Day. So we were talking about self-harm or cutting tonight, although there are different ways that people can self-harm. We talked about cutting, pinching, scraping, scratching, and Rosie mentioned burning as well. Yes, people will burn they will, use a lighter and use a hot lighter, not necessarily a lit one, but they use a hot one and burn their arms, or they use a cigarette butt or whatever it is that they can get a hold of to burn themselves. People self-harm when they're feeling overwhelmed, when they're going through trauma, when they need to feel something after being numbed by too much trauma. When they need to have a sense of control when they're in a chaotic environment. People don't usually self-harm because they want you to pay attention to them, but like Wendy said, it can be an indirect way. People don't self-harm because they're spoiled. People don't self-harm because they want to go to the hospital. No one wants to go to the hospital, really. And self-harm happens in different ways across different cultures, across different ages, across different ethnicities. Please, I don't want anyone walking away thinking that this is something that's only relegated to a certain kind of people or a certain class of people. It happens to just about anyone. It's dangerous because you can inadvertently hurt yourself so deeply that you can put your life at risk. And also it can lead to suicidal ideation. Hey, Karen, we're just talking about self-harm. We're kind of wrapping up. Keep in mind that the person who is harming themselves is already hurting. So be mindful of how you approach them. Be mindful of how you talk to them. Try not to be critical. Try not to be judgmental. As Rosie said, they're already feeling a lot of shame about their lives and about how they're resolving the issue. One of the telltale signs of cutting is wearing long sleeves, always covering up themselves, even on a hot day. Yes, Rosie, you're right. Educators need training on this. She says, in my years of teaching, I've never received any, wow. In my years of teaching, I've never received any professional development on it as a high school teacher. That is troubling because I can't tell you how many high schoolers and kids 13, 14. I have a young girl right now who is actively cutting, right? Actually, I have 4 young people at my caseload who are actively cutting. You want to be kind and empathetic and warm and supportive when you are talking to a young person who's cutting. Let them know that you're always there for them. Develop a safety plan of things that they can do if they have no one around. Even if they need to call 911 to keep themselves safe from themselves. They can call the kids' help phone. They have a text option. They have a teen option. There are crisis lines all across North America, all across the world, really. Most places have crisis lines where you can contact someone 24/7, even if your parents are not available. If you notice scars, marks on someone's hands, please don't point it out and go, like Rosie said, don't point it out and say, why did you do that to yourself? Or what's that? Try not to stare. Really just offer support because that is what people need. If you have a child who is open to talking about it, talk about it in a loving way. Let them know that you're always there for them. And just have kind of an open door policy. Let them know, even if they don't want to talk about it now, that you are always there for them to talk about it whenever they're ready. And last but not least, offer them some professional support. If you cannot, therapists are available. If you can always reach out to me. If you don't want to reach out to me, you can send me a DM if you want somebody else. There are tons of, professionals on here who are on Instagram that you can find that I can refer you to who'd be willing to offer support to yourself or your young person. As I mentioned, that just know that cutting is not something that only happens in teenage years. I know adults who are doing it, but offer some professional support and let the young people know that they're not alone, that of course they are struggling. They don't have the tools to deal with the stressors of life that we have. And the worst thing about enduring trauma is being alone in that trauma. So that's where I'm going to leave you guys tonight. I hope that was really, really helpful. Thank you. Your legacy lifestyle. Thank you so much. I try to share mental health tips and strategies with people here on Afterthought because not everyone can afford therapy. It is expensive and not everyone has benefits. Not everyone has it out of pocket to go to therapy. There are community agencies out there that offer therapy on a cheaper option or a free option, but often there are long wait lists. So if you think that you might need therapy, you need community support from a community agency, get on their wait list now because the wait can be long. You guys, welcome. You are welcome. Thank you for hanging out with me tonight. I will post these tips on a post maybe tomorrow, and I think I will try and save this live and put it up as well. You guys are amazing. I don't think there will be Afterthought next week, Wednesday. I am taking the week off. I am taking the week off of seeing clients. I'm taking the week off of Afterthought, and I'll be back the following week. So I'll see you guys in 2 weeks, Wednesday night at 8. You guys take care of your mind because you only have one. Talk to you soon.